Welcome, everybody, to the Russell Hobbs Show. We have a special guest today in the studio, Greg McCone, an old friend of mine. He's a very interesting character. So we're going to talk about exciting events, memories, and just roll today and see where we go with it. So welcome to the studio, Greg.
Thank you very much, Russell. Great to be here and discuss some of the history of Dallas and what you've done, what I've done, and how we got here.
Yes. Well, you know, as over the decades that I've known you and gotten to know you better, and it's I just think you're a very interesting cat. And so I wanted to start off with, tell us, where you grew up, what you were like in high school, and start there.
I grew up in Connecticut, about 50 miles east of New York City, and moved to Texas in 1959 when I was 12 years old. And I moved down here saying "you guys," and now I say "y'all." So
that's good.
I think I've picked up an accent in the 60-some years I've been here. But, my youth being in New England at the time in the late 40s and early 50s, New England was kind of where everything was happening. The Dodgers and the Giants and the Yankees were all in New York down the street, and I don't think there was a team west of Kansas City, and baseball and NBA wasn't very big. Even the NFL wasn't really very big when I was a kid. Music, because of the 50s, and I kind of even grew up pre-TV, so we listened to the radio until I was about 7 or 8, and the family got a TV set. So music became very important to everyone, and my parents were into big bands and that kind of thing. And then when I was about 9 or 10 or something like that, rock and roll started to hit, so that was a move and into the future where I would end up. And so as I said, at 12, we moved down here, and I fully expected to go to the Saturday morning movies and hitch my horse at a post out front. I didn't really realize that at the time Dallas kind of even looked a little bit like a mini New York, So that was somewhat of a shock. But, I lived in what then was far north Dallas, Marsh Lane and Walnut Hill Lane. And at that intersection, the northwest intersection, there were 200 or 300 horses running in a stabled area out there. So
you did get a little of your Texas dream.
Yeah, I really did. And then some of the kids I went to St. Monica school with had horses. And so after school, we'd run over kind of in the Midway Royal Lane area. There were a lot of stables over there, and kids had their horses there. So yeah, I didn't ever get too enamored of it, but I got my feet wet, I guess. And so then just, the next few years, Russell, watching Dallas grow, at one point my dad said, let's move to the country. So we picked up and moved about 7 miles north. And when Beltline ran out, we bought a house near Brookhaven Country Club. And that was the far country. There was stables all over the place out there in those days. And I was going into high school, went to Jesuit high school, and spent 2 years at the old school on Oak Lawn and 2 years at the new one on Inwood Road. And so just watching Dallas grow, And
so what were you like in high school? Tell us, Greg McCone walking down the hall in high school. It was
nothing but trouble.
All right.
I guess I subconsciously or something, I've always wanted to walk on the other side of the room from where the mainstream was. And that, in the case of Jesuit High School, meant a real good understanding of a thing called penance hall, which happened after school for about an hour and a half. And I spent enough time in penance hall in my 4 years there that 10 years after I graduated high school, when I wanted to get married, I called the prefect of discipline and said, can we get married in your faculty chapel back where the priests lived behind Jesuit, which is where we got married. So, I developed a good relationship with him. But, it just seemed like the kids that were just not necessarily wild and crazy, but the kids that were searching and, as the song goes, looking for answers without any clues kind of a thing, So that's where I was coming from. And that meant every weekend roaming downtown Dallas or Wyrock Lake or different areas of town, and just not really looking for trouble, looking for what's out there.
Adventure. Life. Hey,
yeah.
Let's live it up, right?
Yeah. So, now that I've gotten to be as old as I am, I'm looking around and none of those guys are left anymore. So, it's interesting to look back and see how quickly 75 years goes by, and to look at downtown Dallas being the center of everything when I moved here, and downtown Dallas is a city somewhere south of where I live now,
So let me say this. Forgive me, I didn't do a great job of introducing Greg today. Let's jump over here and say this. Cool. I know that you're the guy, the illustrious Greg McCone, who ran the Start Club, and you worked at Mariano's when you guys basically invented the margarita machine, and you've managed a lot of really cool clubs. So forgive me, I didn't have a described introduction for you, but I want you to quickly say just topically ramble all the clubs that you worked at, okay, and then tell me how you got into the arts and entertainment industry.
Yeah. You applied for.
Russell, I've always been a believer, and so a lot of times I will say, by the grace of God, I ended up here, there, or any other place. Mm-hmm. And it happened to be, in terms of the food and beverage industry, I was working in apparel, a line of leather coats back in the Superfly days, and I was working for a fella, and he was not doing well and owed me a little bit of money. And my best friend happened to be a cook at what was then the second Steak and Ale that was built. The first one, I think, was either Lemon Avenue or Northwest Highway, and then they built Bachman Lake. And he said, you should come in here and become a waiter at Steak and Ale. I think I was 25 years old, and all I could picture was dressing up like Robin Hood with buckles on my shoes, the pilgrim outfit, right. And, I can't do that. I'm 25 years old. But, the reality set in, you got to pay your rent. So I took the job, and the first night I stuck $30 in my pocket, and they asked me how I wanted my filet cooked at the end of the night and get you a beer. And, I said, this really can't be all that bad. And so I ended up being a waiter there, and they asked me to bartend, which I did in days. And I stayed there about 3 months, and at that point, the liquor law had changed, and so bars were exploding all over Dallas. But the main areas at that point was where I was, Bachman Lake, European Crossroads, and Greenville Avenue. And Greenville and Lover's Lane was Old Town. And Daddy's Money and Mariano's and all kinds of restaurants had opened there. So my brother was a bartender at Mariano's and asked if I wanted to come work nights there, which I did. And Mariano had basically been the first person to market frozen margaritas out of a machine. He had tried to get Slurpees, and I think they maybe had some issues with liquor. And so he ended up buying an old frosty machine, and we had that machine, and that's what we poured the margaritas out of. And it's where I first learned in a number of ways that I had some management expertise, because understanding motion and time and how long it takes to do this and where you're going to get it and do you have enough, and all those issues came into play every day. And so coming up with some solutions to, as an example, why one machine? I run out of my margarita. I got to wait 30 minutes for this to freeze, so I can't sell any margarita. Give me another machine. So we did that. And then instead of making 100 gallons in 1 gallon containers, start making them in 5 gallon containers so I can fill a machine. Just little things like that.
It makes all the difference, though. Management for a restaurant or club, it's everything. I wish I would have known you back in the day, because I never had a great manager.
A perfect example, we're tripping over 55 of these empty bleach containers by the end of the night, and there's the kitchen, the swinging doors that go into the kitchen. Well, the other side of this wall is the walk-in. cut me a butcher door in that wall and had the bar bag just go in there and he can open it and hand me a 5-gallon bucket and I give it right back to him, you know, instead of dollies and hauling them out and through the crowd on a Saturday night and all those issues. But it was a fun gig. I actually met my wife there, and my brother met his first wife there. So, and there are all kinds of restaurants around Dallas that have ex-employees of that Mariano's that have been running, you know, Desperados. George at Desperados been down there probably 40 years now. And so he was my boss at that place, and George Levy. And so anyway, I went from there to Don the Beachcomber Corporation, which was owned by Ron Getty. And they opened 4 high-end restaurants in Dallas at the same time. I switched to bartending over there at Captain Cook's on Greenville Avenue, and I worked for about a year, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday nights, and lived in Highland Park and played golf every day and was off Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and just had the time of my life. And they kept bugging me, you need to get into management, blah, blah, blah. So one day I just got off that ladder and got on the other ladder, which is management. And I spent 5 years with that company operating different units that they had. Don the Beachcomber was right next to the original Captain Cook's there. And then from there went down to Houston and ran a disco in the Galleria area right across from the Galleria behind Sakowitz, and it was called Pistachios. And it was one of these, this is 1978, so this is all flash, disco, mirror balls, and in Houston, all the crowds were totally different than Dallas. In Houston, the girls wore chiffon dresses and high heels. The guys had suits and ties on. You couldn't get in any club in town with athletic shoes. Dallas was still people dancing separately in blue jeans and, you know, whatever, just being comfortable.
At the Beggars Club and Papagayo.
Yeah. And that, you know, to me, Houston at that time was sort of like a cross between New York City and Dallas. It was in between, you know. John Travolta was at Gillies at that time filming Urban Cowboy. So, you know, there's a lot of disco happening kind of stuff there, and had a great year there, enjoyed it, but really missed Dallas. And I got married while I was down there to my girlfriend from up here. And so we came back up here, and I think I ran a place called Tingles on Northwest Highway for about a year, and then left there and went to DFW.
I'm going to refrain from all jokes about the name of your club, Tingles.
Yeah, you know, that's those guys are 4 brothers from Boston. God knows where they ended up with that. But no, so I ended up running the branding iron and the disco and stuff at the Amfac Hotel at DFW. And, you know, got to meet a couple of presidents and, you know, had them in for dinner. And one day Braniff went under and they pulled all their jets up outside my window downstairs. I could look at 85 Braniff jets all, you know, like this. And then...
so you're learning the food and beverage industry. You're moving up. You're a big manager now. Mm-hmm. And that was like, say, 82 then? And most
that
hotels?
Was about, 81. By 80, my son was born in 81. And at that time, I was food and beverage director of the Ambassador Hotel downtown that burned recently, a couple of years ago. It was in construction to reopen. And then I did a lot of consulting work to fly to Baton Rouge and work with a restaurant for a month, teach them how to run it and that kind of stuff. And in the meantime,
go ahead.
One of my people I worked with, the sales director and marketing director for the hotel, when that hotel went into bankruptcy, they kept both of us. And at a certain point, it just wasn't going to make it. So she said, "Are you interested in doing a nightclub?" And I said, "You know, what's up?" She goes, "Well, my cousin from California is building a nightclub here. And so if you want, I'll set up an interview." And so that's basically what happened. I was also interviewing to take over Brook Hollow Country Club as the general manager at the same time. And I went and met Blake Woodall and Philippe Stark and interviewed, and just basically talked about the business, the industry and such. And Blake told me what he'd been involved with, the 80 and maybe Nostromo. I forget if he was with that or not. But the job to me, I love playing golf. And a lot of people said, why would you even think about doing something like that instead of Brook Hollow? You play golf 4 or 5 times a week and just kind of hang out and be the guy, And I said, because there's not really an upside. Where are you going to take it? It's a new ladder. You got to get on the bottom step of a new ladder and carry it somewhere, which Brook Hollow, they just don't want you to screw anything up,
Yeah, it'd be a great kind of retire and coast gig, right?
Yeah. So
you were ready to do something more phenomenal.
Going back to how was I in high school, everybody on this side of the room would have taken the Brook Hollow job because it's secure and marriage and, the house and Highland Park. And everybody on this side would have gone the other way,
So tell us about 1984. You guys opened the Start Club.
1984.
Spring of 84.
We had been building the club. I think Blake had been at it about a year before I came on.
I think Blake was hyping up the opening of the Start for almost 2 years.
Easily. I was there a year and a half of the 2 years. So, and it's a strange thing. We ultimately came up with, and I think it might have been Christina that came up with the line that we're going to open in 90 days. And, when you didn't hit that mark, she said, well, we said we're going to open in 90 days. We just never said from when. Right. So
convenient. That's why.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of, when you've been promising to open for 2 years and every newspaper and magazine in town has been writing about you and you've never gotten anything done, you got to come up with something, But no, 1984, we worked in my entire life changed. I would have to say going back to 83, because in working with that group of people at the club, it was a paradigm change in my life. I had all the management experience. I could run anything. I could run a tractor factory because management is management, But you got to learn when someone says, well, everybody in town's $3 cover charge, we're going to be 10. You're going to have to explain that to me, how that's going to work, When you tell me 22,000 feet of black marble floors, all these issues. And so what I learned from Blake that was so much fun is he was just all in on this deal. And we had about 6 or 7 people that were the center cadre of everything that was happening. Sarah, Valerie, Chuck and Dino, each of those people. And we had to make decisions about everything that was going to be involved in this club. What are the hours going to be? What kind of music are we going to play? Are we going to do food? We got a whole kitchen back here. Are we going to do glass? Are we going to do, what are everything? And so that's where we spent the year and a half previous to opening while the contractors were building the club, right? We're upstairs on the second floor in another space that we had at the time, and that's where all the demonstrations and everything were taking place. So, as an example, you end up, as I said, deciding all these things. The glasses, as an example, we decided we wanted crystal glasses. And so we have all the vendors coming in and they're bringing us samples of this, that, and the other. And we wanted glasses that no one else had. We ended up getting a straight-sided glass. It's probably 8 inches tall. The bottom couldn't be thicker glass. It had to be the same thickness as the sides. The rim couldn't have the little round edge on it. It had to come straight up and end. And so everybody brought us these glasses. And the ultimate decision as to which one it was going to be was we went down to the club and stood above the black marble floors and dropped the glass. And how did it sound when it hit the floor? So if you're going that far, right? If you're going that far into details, which we were, the matches. I mean, the one row had to be black, one had to be white, then the next one black, and the heads had to be the opposite. It was stupid things, but every one of those things came to play in the next 6 years when people went, look what they did.
Yeah, it's
Look
beautiful.
at
Well,
this.
the Stark represented an international caliber real club in Dallas for the first time ever.
Right.
Because
right.
I've been to Mexico City and New York, and after that I've been to Europe many times and all, but I mean, I'm from here too, and I know that Cafe Dallas and Elon was sort of trying to be Elon was the high class club
It was.
on Greenville.
Right.
And then you had Mistral,
Yeah.
which was pretty cool, and then they did live shows probably to make money.
Now,
The Stark upped the game. The Stark was top shelf, world caliber place. And so let's jump in. We only have so much time. Jump into some juicy stories that happened at the Stark. Like, say, the boom of the first year, the good stuff.
The first year, to be honest, we weren't busy. We had a club that held 2,000 people, and we're probably putting 350 people in the club on a Saturday night. And it went that way for a long time, in part because, as you mentioned, 2-year lead up to some, you're kind of, you're over it before it ever even opens. There were different elements of having Edwige at the front door, who came from Studio 54 and very French, and her attitude would be in New York, let the cool people in and keep out the uncool people. Well, when she's trying to do that in Dallas, not all 100 cool people in Dallas are downtown on a Saturday night.
You're hilarious.
And so you'd end up with 350 people. And so finally we made a decision. It was an event that came up that we normally would not do. It was a promo on the radio station, an AM station that wanted to use the club on a Monday night, and all my staff totally against it. We don't advertise. We don't even have a sign out front, right? And the PR director said, "Man, they're going to give us 50 air spots and bring in 2,000 people and blah blah blah." So my attitude was, in all our management meetings, we vote democratically. We go around, we talk about everybody's buying in before we say we're going to do it, right? Well, that's probably one of the only 2 times in 6 years that I said, okay, I'm totally countermanding what your decision is. We're going to do this party. My expectation is that these 2,000 people will come in here, and then on Saturday night, 300 of them will come back, and they'll bring somebody, which means I'll have 950 people on Saturday night instead of 350 again. And if that works, the following week, it's going to snowball. So we did, it's exactly what happened. I mean, we just got hit starting day one. As soon as we did that party, I think I did $83,000 in February. I did 139 in March. 200 in April. By August, I was doing $350,000 a month.
It was a very smart move. It was a classic example of you've got the super cool elites, but you have to have the commoners to worship the super cool elites.
Right.
It can't be the cosmos of the universe of the club can't just be all the super elite type people.
And how elite can you be when you're running 4,000 people through your room at night? Right. On a busy Saturday. The deal is, by the grace of God, again, everybody blended together. It didn't. The first crowds were that radio station crowd that And then what I had done at the front door was I said, "Look, we're going to stop this thing of only letting the cool people in. We're going to let everybody in, and we're going to throw out the jackasses," right? And so that was the turning point. We started letting people in. And so then the hairdressers, and then the smaller parties, and then the staff starts thinking up these theme parties like Works in Progress, where we invited in all the flower designers in Dallas to take a section and decorate it however they wanted.
Great idea.
And the hairdressers come in and 7 salons on a Thursday night.
Not only that, what I'm seeing though, that it sounds like what happened, because I went there a little bit the first year, a couple of times before I opened the Deep Ellum Theater Gallery and stuff. But what I see happening though is when you let all the people in, and you do have the super cool elite people from New York and France, and the dress code, then in a way, you start teaching everybody how to be cool. Exactly. And how to dress better.
That's exactly right.
So it raised the bar for everybody.
Nobody knew what Gerbeau was in 1984 till we opened up, and all of a sudden, the fashions changed, and the other thing was just the mixing of the gay and straight, which just became a total non-issue. It's funny, Russell. When we first started getting busy, right after that party, where it hit first was 4 towns outside of Dallas. And all of a sudden, every Thursday, people would roll in from Shreveport, Waco, Oklahoma City, and Abilene. All these towns are 200 miles outside of but every Thursday, 800, 900, 1,000 of these kids would roll into Dallas on Thursday night, and they'd leave Monday morning at 5 a.m. when I closed down and go back to college. And that right there is what began. And also at the same time, Rick Scolani came in, and that music was unattainable anywhere else in the nation. So you had, a virtual black marble stage of 22,000 feet with crystal glasses and the greatest crowds you can have to start with. And those crowds brought in the really hip crowds because they saw everybody having such a great time.
It's a beautiful picture. Everyone likes to use the Costner thing. If you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
And it's a great movie about baseball and all. But honestly, I tell entrepreneurs and small business people all the time, just because you build something does not mean they're going to come.
Right.
Because most businesses fail. The concept's not great, the name, the location, it's all got to work, right?
Yeah.
But the Stark is a perfect example of a perfect storm where the zeitgeist of the day in the early 80s was kind of like, people were tired of the materialistic, shallow entertainment, cover bands and the good old Dallas scene. It was okay. Cafe Dallas Elan wasn't great, but there was definitely a need and a hunger for something like Stark to come in and put Dallas on the map. And you guys just navigated that and created this thing. Build it and they will come. And you had all the elements, and it really blew up to be an awesome thing.
It was absolutely incredible.
So I was a little more, try to use the right words here. I was more kind of like, live music, raw kind of thing.
You were kind of street, but you were the age.
Well, I moved in a warehouse in Deep Ellum, and so you guys opened in the spring of '84. And so in the summer of '84, I moved in Deep Ellum. There was nothing there, and and we built it at the theater gallery.
From scratch.
And they came, so in the same way, you guys developed a culture in the West End that put Dallas on the international club map. Because I always tell everybody there was nothing in the West End except Spaghetti Warehouse.
There's nothing downtown.
Where you went, that's true. You'd go to on your prom dinner. Everybody'd go from the suburbs to Spaghetti Warehouse, and then at West End was a ghost town. And Deep Ellum was a ghost town.
I graduated high school in 1965. That was the year downtown Dallas shut down.
Please refrain
with
from
the opening
dates
of
and
North
ages
Park.
because you're a young guy. I know that wasn't even a true statement. There's no way. So what I'm saying is, it's like build it and they will come is sometimes true if all the elements are there that need to be there for that cake to rise. And like you said, if it's God's destiny, the things can really happen so beautifully.
Well, you're exactly right. The elements in the first year when the owners are freaking out and Blake and Cena, why isn't this working and this, that, and the other? And I just kept smiling and saying, we can't screw this up. Not meaning that we can't, meaning that we can't. This is so well put together with these 12 or 15 elements that something's going to make it happen. We can't screw it up. Just ride it,
It's funny. I've never seen this because I've known Blake now for 40 years and I've known you for 30. And, I was at the Stark a couple of times in the first year and I've never seen until today. And you're painting a picture that, there was so much talent there with the musical people and Blake's vision. And Blake's a really classy, visionary, really smart guy. and all your staff. But it sounds like to me you were the down to earth transplanted Texan going, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And you kind of brought them down from the clouds every once in a while. I said, let's just make it where people come and have fun.
They won.
Hey, don't interrupt me when I'm trying to make you look good. So I said, you were the guy that was like the down to earth guy. Like, wait a minute, this is all super cool, but let's make it where people can actually come and have fun, right?
Right.
And that's a beautiful thing too.
I could never did not really ever work that well in bureaucratic situations, which is big hotels and, the Dunphy and the AmFac and all that. Like Blake, when we opened up, he wanted to use a liquor, nobody had computers then. He wanted to use a liquor computer system, which I had never used before. I'd use guns that would have bourbon and scotch. Yeah, but I hate that. But he had a thing that was a donut. You like put it over the neck of the thing and it had a cord and it would only allow I don't think we ever used it. We might have, but immediately I said, we're not doing that. First off, I'm not even going to use a jigger. These guys are going to pour a drink. I want that. You spend all this time working on a crystal glass that you want to look. What are you going to give them, a crappy drink?
It's got to look sexy and be sexy.
You got to give them a drink. Give them 2.5 ounces of it, whatever it is. What I want is a bar cost of 12%. And if you give me a 12% bar cost, you've got carte blanche. If you want to buy Russell a drink, buy him 2. Your brother's birthday, buy him a couple of drinks. You spill a drink, put it on a spill. You buy a drink, put it on a comp. Before I figure my inventory, my bar cost, I'm going to take those off. I'll figure out what my bar cost is. And if it's under 12%, you're good. If it's 14%, your comp privileges are cut off. You can't give anything away. So the bottom line is, and Mike Grisham, my bar manager, he's just brilliant. And he'd been my bar manager at Captain Cook's. And he gave me a legal size bar report every week, once a month. And it had every week on there, by bar, by bartender, bar cost. It was 5 legal pages long. And he also gave me, the last page had the top 20 other clubs in town, what their sales were. But it's like, how hard is it to follow this?
Were you guys ever beating the Anatole on sales, monthly sales? Because I remember every report I'd see, the Anatole was always number one.
But the Anatole's collective with
Were you
the
guys
hotel.
number one at one?
We were number one in I don't know if we were ever number one in liquor sales because we were only open 20 hours a week for liquor, right? We were open after hours, almost 30 hours a week. Okay. What we were at one time was selling more Corona beer than anybody in the state of Texas. When one of my more brilliant decisions went back on me, Corona beer decided they were going to go from $10 to $10.50 a case, and I went, I'm number one in the state. I'm not paying the extra 50 cents. And they said, well, you got to. And I said, well, I'm not carrying it. So I quit carrying it, and I lost all kinds of business to Mistral because they had Corona.
Wow. Oh, well.
Poor choice.
Okay, so let's go with the Stark, hit Dallas. It was a super cool thing. Everybody knows the story of great success. And then it had the, ecstasy thing was legal, and it was in all the clubs. And then the ecstasy became illegal.
Yeah.
And you guys, they had the raid, and then you couldn't dance. And all this. I'm trying to kind of, speed us up to, why don't you, the story arc of the Stark was you told us how you got it, you guys got it open. You told us how you made it really profitable.
Yeah.
And so get the third act of the Stark.
We did great for a couple of years, 3 years. And when I say great, I mean, on the sales you were maximizing what you could do. Then we had a couple of years that we probably were just like every other club in town, making money, maybe making 80 or 100,000 in a month or whatever, but you weren't breaking any records. We had a regular clientele for 4 or 5 years. It stayed with us. They came every night. The city started to change somewhat in that, I guess it was a recession of maybe 87 or something hit. Excuse me. And the brand new buildings, skyscrapers all over downtown. They'd just gotten through building them all, and they were all in bankruptcy, and the savings and loans failed, and so it became, gradually a little bit different over the years because people started saying, "When's your discounted drink night?" and this kind of stuff, and that's not what we were doing. We were going to be what we were, or we were going to be nothing at all, So those issues came into play, but the ecstasy situation, almost as soon, I would say within a year and a half after we opened, somebody mentioned it to me one day, one of the employees, and he said, a lot of people aren't buying drinks because they're on ecstasy. And it turns out, I guess everybody just drinks water or orange juice or something when they're doing X. But X was a legal drug. We talked about it, Blake and I, and in meetings and such, and we had wholesalers that wanted to give us the drugs at incredibly good prices and sell it. And for some period of time, we could have done that, but that's not the business I'm in either. And why do I want to sell something that's going to make my people drink less, which takes away from the business I am in, But the drug grew, the reputation grew, the connections between Dallas and the Start Club and Ibiza and the Manchester Club in England and Barcelona and Stockholm and these places where ecstasy started to pop up. Because of the bands, we had all the bands. We're always going to the Star Club when they were in town. And it's funny, New Order and some of those bands, one of them says in one of the movies that they were offered ecstasy at the Star Club, and they were like, "Oh, no, thank you, we don't do that at all." And they said that when they were there 2 years later, they couldn't get enough, But we were that far ahead of the curve on that drug. Basically, my understanding what happened is that some DJ from New York City in the late 80s had spent a sojourn in London playing somewhere. And when he came back to New York, he brought back both ecstasy and house music to New York and says, "Here's your music and here's your new drug." And that's when ecstasy hit New York. But that's 3 years after it was happening down here. So, of course, the DEA, once it became illegal, everybody has to make examples of whomever. And so because of our prominence and because of the fact that no one had ever heard of it until when it hit the club, we were a target, although I think they had busted a lot of places in Dallas, maybe for up to a year before they actually broke us. We were raided in August of 86. I think it became illegal in maybe June of 85 or something. So anyway, we fought them. We felt we were right. We felt to a certain extent if people are doing drugs in our building and the cops don't like it, the cops should come in and find them and take them and arrest them and take them out. We're not blatantly allowing anybody to do drugs on a table that we're not responding to, and, but taking a pill, how do you manage that, And we were definitely permissive in terms of the lifestyles that we were allowing and fostering, but we were not in a position and had taken the position from the very beginning. We don't want to sell it when it's legal. We sell liquor, not drugs. So we fought the Dallas police. We fought the TABC. We ended up paying a $10,000 fine, I think, to the TABC. The Dallas Police Department got hacked and said, "We're taking your dance permits." So we fought them and ultimately settled on 2 weeks of a suspension of our dance permit. And so Blake and I met with the chief of police and the narcotics department and everything. And at the meeting, they said, "When do you want to close?" "What, 2 weeks?" And I said, "Oh, we're not closing. I'm just not going to dance." And they were immediately hacked. In fact, he called the sheriff's department on the phone because the sheriff's department was working my parking lot. And he said, "Take your men off that site," as we were sitting there. But the philosophy was, I'm going to sell liquor. It has nothing to do with dancing.
It's about music and
play
fun
dance
and,
music. And so it turned out this group again raised up and created 8 nights of parties that had nothing to do with dancing, that didn't really work in terms of marketing to get a lot of people in, but it worked in terms of the notoriety of us fighting the police department on this issue. We did the film, Why Can't I Dance at the Star Club? The Las Colinas Communications Complex called and said, we'll give you guys our studios all night whenever you want it. The Dallas Ballet called and said, what do you want? The skinheads from Deep M called and said, we want to come over and be in your movie. We all went out to Las Colinas, about 60 people, and we filmed this movie of a Little Stevie song, Why Can't I Play Sun City? And Bob wrote new words, Why Can't I Dance at the Star Club? So we did that video. That was the Sunday night party. The Sunday night following was the video release party. We did My Sin from San Francisco. We did,
Stan Fairbanks, great guy.
I think we did Patsy Cline and the Memphis G-Spots, if I remember. We did Karen Finley. Everything we did was in your face. Okay, we're not dancing today. We're going to have Karen Finley strip and pour candied yams all over herself.
Yeah, well, you know, it was a smart move. And what you're saying is, the statement is, the scene was not about drugs or drinking, really. It's about people gathering, the fellowship, social, and the music. That's right. What humans want to do. And so you just reminded me, I want to ask you this, and you and I have never really discussed this. Tell me about, like, I remember one time you had all your guys come over to the Profit Bar when we had Screamin' Jay Hawkins. You know, Screamin' Jay's in there, I Put a Spell on You, and your camera crew came over. I remember they were talking.
David.
And then I heard you guys were playing that in the monitors at the Starclater.
Yeah.
Tell me how that worked. I mean, I just have never even discussed with you, like, backstage. How'd that all go down?
Well, you know, when we moved in, things evolved. You suddenly realize this does this as well as this, right? So Philippe Stark had designed the bathrooms in such a way that there were no lights in there. There was, I think, a 12-inch monitor, TV monitor, that he put above the toilet. So if you were sitting on the toilet, you straight up and there'd be a TV monitor there. There were also stereo speakers in there, which were kind of unheard of at the time. And David Hines and Susie Riddle were our video department. So basically, you know, it really was just supposed to be moving wallpaper, kind of, you know, just something to light the room. But they had carte blanche to do whatever they want. So occasionally David he'd get Susie to drive the pickup, and he'd lay in the bed with a camera, and she'd drive to Waco and back, and he would just shoot up in the air. And it's just, every once in a while, lines going by, or a bird, or one thing or another, you know. And sometimes they'd have a whole theme. It might be robots or something else, but they made videos. So what ultimately ended up happening is guys like Bart Weiss and all the video artists of the time, we even did one of those works in progress parties with video artists, where each of them brought in and did their own videos in a section. So the Dallas Video Festival began, and working with Bart and all of them, and that grew until I think he just resigned, didn't he, in the last year to do his own thing. But that's 40 years, you know. And so video was kind of an unused, not unheard of, but unused very much format in that time period. And we just
one very important reason that video was unused is because the first time that a normal person could buy a video camera with a VHS tape in it for an affordable price and run around shooting was like 1986 and 87.
Right.
That's when they came out. So that's right when you're talking.
So in 84, when we opened, we had a 3/4 inch camera and 2 3/4 inch decks, which nobody else had, right? And you're exactly right. It was like carrying a jam box on your shoulder, the cameras they had in those days. The few films that I have copies of the bands that have played the club, very poor. They would remind you of your dad's 8 millimeters from 1947 or something, you know. You just didn't have very much quality with them. There was a couple of the parties we had, like we threw a homecoming party, and we called it Stark Academy Homecoming, and we had sweatshirts and with the Michigan State looking logo and everything on it. And we put a band together of only employees. And so we picked 8 songs, and we learned 8 songs, and we did it 2 years in a row. Well, one of the 2 years, we have a video of both of them, but it's kind of hard to listen to because it's the microphone is on the camera, and you got the crowd noise and everything else. It would way louder than the band is. But not Bart Weiss, but the kid from On the Air, John Petropoulos. John Petropoulos took it and united it with someone had done a cassette on the soundboard. So he took it all back to the video bar and took our video of the band and the sound off the board. And the next time I happened to be down there, they were playing our band in the video bar, unlike I'd ever heard it because it was with the soundboard, So the difference in better quality and knowing what you're doing and everything really came into play. But we did a lot of things with the videos.
It's funny. It's funny. It's that we're sitting here talking about what happened in the 1980s, and on one hand, it's so strange. On the other hand, it makes perfect sense because so much innovation happened in the 1980s.
Yeah.
The example you just pointed out of accessible video cameras with terrible sound, and then the guy doing the brilliant move to combine that to the board, and all those things. The innovation that happened in 1984 in Dallas, with the West End booming with the Start Club, Deep Ellum springing up with the Theater Gallery, the Profit Bar, later other clubs, and that whole scene of the 80s all over, not just Dallas, but New York, Boston, Milwaukee, or whatever city of the 2 cities, Athens, Georgia.
Yep.
There was a scene like a kind of an underground, get real, express yourself and make art movement all over the country and the world.
I related many times to my staff even how much the Star Club years were like Flower Power Summer in the mid-'60s. How everybody just left home and went to California and grew their hair and a beard and wore the same clothes for 3 months. And, but it became a world of people who, it's funny. We all hitchhiked in those days. I've hitchhiked all over, through the South in the 60s and everything else. And it was funny whenever you saw anybody with long hair, you knew exactly what they were going to be about. So you'd pick them up.
It's a cultural shift.
And then 2 or 3 years later, you couldn't tell anymore because idiots had started growing their hair long. Right. And
but what we're talking about is really a cultural shift that happened in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another cultural shift in the 80s.
Yep.
And it's one of my favorite things because people call it revolution or liberty, and it is. But now you look around going, the culture now seems so, the young people now seem so compliant. And it's even to the point where the young people that are supposed to be the revolutionaries are so submitted to the higher powers.
Right.
That it's scary, right?
Yeah.
And, it's not a political show, but you reminded me of that.
They just don't seem to take an interest in it as much as we do, And a lot of that is I have begun to realize in the last 10 years how old I am by my conversations with people who are younger than me by 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And, I had a circumstance about 5 years ago when I had a friend and I was trying to illustrate to him how old we have become. I said, watch, and it was right across the street here at I Declare, the restaurant. And I said to the waitress, came over, and beautiful black girl, about 30. She just told us she had graduated from University of Texas and everything. And I said, let me ask you a question.
With a waitress degree, right?
The waitress there.
A waitress degree. She got at UT.
Yeah, right. Supplemental.
Okay.
I said, let me ask you something. Do you know who Johnny Carson is? And she went, no. And I said, do you know Bob Hope? And she went, no. I said, do you know John Wayne? And she went, no. And I said, do you know the Beatles? And she went, well, I've heard of them. And so I looked back at my friend and I said, That's my point. We talk to everyone just like they know what we're talking about, but they don't because they have no clue. They weren't even alive for part of these people. So it's not their fault, you know. Well, that's 5 years ago. So I had a guy at my house last week working on the air conditioner, and I showed him a little 2-minute trailer on the Stark documentary. And so it opens with JR. First scene, and he's going, well, one night we went down there at 2 in the morning, and blah, blah, blah. I said, do you know who that is? And he went, no. And I went, JR? He went, Dallas? He went,
haven't you ever watched I Dream of Jeannie? I mean,
so
everybody's seen I Dream of Jeannie, right?
I'm thinking to myself, did Dallas like end in 90 or something? Am I 32 years beyond their last show? Or, you know, I have no concept of time any longer, you know?
No, it's a valid point, but ironically, though, I feel like the counterpoint would be that all the young people now, that I feel like so many of them love classic rock, and they all watch. And the television, American television, is still popular all over the world. So I'm surprised that person never saw Larry Hagman on I Dream of Jeannie, although he probably looks really young there. And so the JR connection doesn't happen.
Well, and just so many things just aren't even, you know, germane. Even things like really where you're not getting enough participation is young kids are not involved enough in, they don't even know what's going on in the world. They don't read the paper. They don't watch the news. All they've ever heard is Fox is all this way and everybody else is all the other way. And so pick which side you want to piss you off and watch that one, you know. But it's not really a thing of interest to them, you know.
Well, I think what you're saying is that the television social media program project has been a success. And here we are.
And here you are. My son won't watch the news, but he'll sit there with his telephone and play some game where he's playing people all over the world, and he'll play that 10 hours a day. You know?
Well, viva la revolution. And I'm so glad that we got to both partake in some, and we're not finished. We have not yet begun to fight. So, Greg, we're getting close to the end of the show. Yeah, I hate to say, but time rolls on, and it's been so good talking. And I have one question I ask all my guests.
Absolutely.
And that is, what do you think about God, Mr. McCone?
You know, I was brought up Catholic. I love ritual, which Catholics have plenty of. I love history. I love the histories of religions and one thing or another. I got off in a totally different direction in the probably 70s, late 70s, where I got into New Age, thinking about religion and teleporting yourself and thought transference and all those kind of things.
It was all those chicks on the hippie bus when you were hitchhiking.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
But to me, what I felt like was there was validity with everything that I heard. And so let's go back to Catholic. They would teach you that God is everywhere. He's all being, all seeing, all hearing, and this, that, and the other. And so I took what I had gleaned and sort of that philosophy and said to myself, the only way that can be is if God is everywhere. And the only way that can be is if God is everything. And so that's kind of where I've ended up. God to me is everything. Everything that exists, life. You know, you get people now talking about souls and abortion and this, that, and the other. And even aside from souls, what does everything on this earth have that they can't give themselves that they all have? And that's life. It's the only thing common to everything living is life. And so in that life, I think, is God. And if you want to talk about a heaven or hell, I think
you're saying life, the life force is God.
The life, being alive. A baby inside a woman, I think, is a life.
Yes.
I don't think it should be a choice situation other than, you know, beat up and, you know, whatever in some time frame. But the importance of life to me is the key to all of it, the essence of all of it. And our job to be here on earth is to try to be as perfect as you can be. Try to be as much like God, what you think God could be, as, try to assimilate to that. Not
So,
these
okay,
other
I've got
things.
two things I want to ask you, because normally I ask people, what do you think about God? And I'm not setting it up as a debate, but you've provoked two questions I want to ask. One is, you said if we're going to the goal is to be perfect and be like God. So what God's standard are you using to line up to? What is our standard to be like God?
Well, the standard is just to try to be positive and uplifting with every relationship, every instance you have with people. Be a good example.
I mean, where do you get that
Make
standard,
the right
though?
answer.
Is that from your Catholic Jesus?
It might be. It might be.
That's
I
my
might
question.
just be fortunate that I grew up with a bunch of people who, are good people. I mean, I know people that try to do everything right and they're just fanatics. And one of my best friends, he became such a Jesus freak. I didn't even see him the last 20 years because he just could not talk about anything else, We do have to live in this world, and we all are sinners, and we're going to make our mistakes and do this, that, and the other. None of us is going to be perfect. A perfect example for using the word perfect is, what do you have to do to throw a perfect game in baseball?
Strike everybody out.
Well, you are right, but that's not the answer. The answer is you got to get 27 outs in a row.
Okay.
What do you call it when a guy throws 81 strikes? Is that a pluperfect game?
Right.
Right?
Okay.
Perfect is relative.
The other question I had for you to come back on was, you said that you think everything with life is the life force that gives everything life is God. I think that's beautiful, and mostly would agree with the biblical view, which, the Catholic religion is based on the Bible.
Yeah.
And they've added some other stuff, but in general, you must say that Catholics go back to the Bible. So it says in Genesis that God breathed life. He molded Adam with the clay, and then breathed in life and made him a living soul. See,
there you go.
I believe that actually happened. I'm
Yes.
a very simple Bible believing, non-religious person, and so it agrees with what you're saying. But animals have life too, and I'm not saying that
Rocks have life.
well, now there's where we probably differ. But I know animals, like they're different than humans, but they have life force in them. And it's amazing how God created dogs and dolphins and horses. I mean, a horse will die for you.
How does God create a dog that when his master dies, he goes and sits by the grave for the first 3 or 4 weeks,
No, it's a beautiful
That's not the
thing.
life of some dumbass dog.
Yeah, so I would contend that some animals were created by God to be like our companions. Like a horse will actually die in battle for its owner. And a dog, like you said, he's mourning his owner.
Every one of those, I sit in my backyard, watch blue jays, and my dog's chasing the squirrels and rabbits and this, that, and the other, and I go, I am Aesop fables in my backyard.
Oh, I thought you'd go with
coffee and go sit in the Garden of Eden.
I thought you'd go with Saint Francis of Assisi.
Or Saint Francis.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's it's a case of, if you think about it, Russell, everything has to be one because it all came from the Big Bang, which was one thing blew up.
Well, I think the Big Bang was God saying, "Let there be." I think the creation,
But he's doing it with the only thing that existed, which is him.
yeah, the Big Bang and the creation were the same event, interpreted.
And is it all going to come back together again?
But here's
at some
here's
point?
one difference, because we're wrapping up, and I'm gonna our only sponsor, my new book that's out. You got to buy it on Amazon or whatever. I would differentiate though that the Bible says that He created man in His own image, the man, and took out the woman. So we're like, we can be His sons. And then, though I don't know if animals would fit
But
there.
think
So I would
about-
differentiate animals and us.
Think about you. He created you in
I never
his
think
image.
about myself, but go ahead.
My point is, I often look at people and I don't see a person. What I see is billions of cells in colloidal suspension. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah.
What you are, I see, but that's a manifestation of what I see. A different person over here might look at exactly you, but see a totally different thing. They might see a pink shirt, to exaggerate, But what you really are is iron and copper and gold and 80% water, H2O, and all these things that are held up in colloidal suspension to walk the earth.
That's beautiful. And I will add that the scripture says that all those things are held together by his word.
There you go.
He's holding us all together, and he is love.
And, I kind of look at it like it's one of those things where we don't get to go till we all go, right? Just because you or I or 100,000 other people may have a good handle on what it really is, even though there's no proof till you get there, I believe we all have to drag everybody else with us. We have to figure out how to drag all of society into thinking about how perfect life really is. Until you believe that there is perfection, you can't really ever get there.
That's a great point. And we're going to have to end the show now with Cosmic Greg McCone. Has been an awesome guest. Thank you for coming and sharing great stories. And I learned a lot about you and some things that happened in Dallas history today. And thank you for joining us today. Look up Greg McCone on social media. Russell Hobbs, your host, and we'll see you next time.